What's up, Pags here at MEI Studio. We're going to take a look at another vintage alternative to the Shure SM57. Today, we're checking out the Akg D1000E. As we saw in the D1000E video, link up top, AKG in the late 1960s and 70s were all about trying to innovate the live dynamic mic. They were using new materials and trying different ideas, like the sintered bronze head baskets instead of traditional wire mesh. Though the basic principle of the dynamic mic's magnet and coil wasn't really changing much, and honestly really wouldn't until the 1980s when neodymium came into play, the use of lighter diaphragm materials and polymers was a major advancement over the old metallic diaphragm materials that had been used previously. 1968 saw the launch of a set of new microphones in the Dynamic series for AKG. The cardioid mics were the D1000E, an entry-level ball-type mic reminiscent of the Unisphere from Shure at the time, the D1000E, which we've seen previously, the D1000E, the D200E, and the only omni-pattern mic of the bunch, the D160E. While the D200E was marketed as the recording mic, the D1000E was aimed more at the professional live stage performance crowd. Of note, Jim Morrison of The Doors used the D1000E for rehearsals and apparently a few gigs as well. Their sound guy, Vince Traynor, had purchased them for purposes of miking up the drums and guitar cabinets, but I guess Jim just found it more convenient to grab one of those mics instead. Back in the early 70s, the MSRP of the mic was around $65 USD. The D200E was $10 more and the D190E was $10 less. Likely the mic was sold at a discount off that price, but even still, in 2023 dollars, that would put the price of this mic somewhere just north of $500. Today, the mics can be found for not much more than the original MSRP. I've actually purchased these mics for as low as $50 and have seen them go up to $200 and over for those having the original box, case, clip, etc., etc. While very popular in Europe, the US didn't quite take to AKG dynamic mics the same way people took to US brands like Shure and EV. But there were plenty of keen-eared folks that knew what was up and sought these mics out for their sound. But why? Well, we'll let our ears decide that later on, but first, let's take a quick glance at the spec sheet and compare to, say, an early Shure Unidyne sheet from the same time period. At its non-filtered setting, the D1000E is claimed to be flat from 90 Hz all the way up to around 4K, with only a 2 dB bump between 4 and 7K. It rolls off below 90 Hz and goes all the way down to 40 Hz in the bottom end. The top end rolls off between the 12 and 17K area. The mic is cardioid, but it's not a very tight pattern in the low end, but as you get up into the higher upper vocal range, the pattern tightens up considerably. The impedance is 200 ohms. Oops, technical difficulty, I forgot to record this section. Anywho, the mic has a three-way position switch on the bottom of it that has a B, M, and S setting, which is bass, middle, and sharp. It's essentially just a bass roll-off in varying degrees. The sharp is said to be used for outdoor purposes where it can help to alleviate any wind noise. The middle is good for anything that has a lot of bass, and the bass mode is basically the microphone unfiltered, which is what I used for all of the demos that we did today. By comparison, the Unidyne 3 starts its bass roll just under 200 Hz, and it's somewhat flat, a little bit scooped, I guess you could say, to around 1K, where it starts its climb to an almost 7 dB peak at 6K before coming back down around 9K and then up and down to about 10K, and then it rides down to 15K. The mic's rated for 50 Hz to 15K and is rated at 150 ohms with an actual reading more of like 270 ohms. Its polar pattern is significantly tighter than the AKG across the frequency spectrum. Now, never do I think that flat responses equal a better mic. That's simply not the case ever. And hopefully none of you out there are judging a mic by its frequency curve. It's not really what those are supposed to be used for. However, I do find mics with flatter responses, they tend to take EQ a little better in a more, I guess you could say, expected fashion. I mean, let's face it, the SM57 has been around for a long time, and its sound is loved by many and tolerated at best by everyone else. And its frequency curve is just a hot mess in the top end. Personally, I'm not a fan of the 57 on just about any source, but when I put one up, I know exactly what I'm going to expect. As a side note, there are a lot of grumblings around the internet about the sound of a vintage SM57 made in the USA and those now made in Mexico. All I like to say about this is that Shure for years has sworn that the mic specs have not changed since the move, and my ears kind of believe that more than a lot of what these folks want to claim. Many speak of a softer sound of the vintage 57. Some describe it as more gritty, while others describe it having less honk in the mid-range. To me, it sounds like they're describing three different mics that age differently, and honestly, I would think that a dynamic mic that's now pushing 40 years or more probably sound a little different than it did the day you picked it up. In 40 years, people will probably be saying the same things about the mics that were produced in the late 80s and 90s. Who knows? The Unidyne 3 capsule, originally used in the 57 and 58, is still being used on current models 545 and 565. Honestly, if you look at the two capsules side by side, there's really not much difference to it except for maybe the material that the capsule is made out of. According to the guy that designed all of these mics, the difference between the 57 and the 545's body was purely purpose-driven for either installation use in the case of the 545 and stage use for the 57, but the capsules originally were the same. So back to today's subject, how does this mic stack up to the venerable SM57? Let's throw it into the studio and see it on some piano, electric guitar, bass, and snare drum. I was also able to get some female vocals through this mic and a Shure 565. Let's get to it.
for some time. Can't stop staring at those ocean eyes. Burning cities and napalm skies. 15 flares into those ocean eyes. No fair. You really know how to make me cry when you give me those ocean eyes. I've been watching you for some time. Can't stop staring at those ocean eyes. Burning cities and napalm skies. 15 flares into those ocean eyes. Those ocean eyes. No fair. You really know how to make me cry when you give me those ocean eyes.
I seem to be on a mission to convince anyone out there not to use an SM57 in the studio anymore. I'm probably not going to succeed with that, but honestly, I've stopped using it in favor of a whole slew of different things. How did you think the D1000E stacked up on guitar and snare? Were there any surprises? Was there a clear winner for you? Leave me some comments down below. Let's get a good old-fashioned internet argument going over something that's pretty much a personal preference matter. Kidding. Not kidding. And now, something that I'd like to address. The vocal test that we did. Both of those mics are really cheap. Honestly, they're around $100 each. So if this didn't convince you that your vocal mic doesn't make that big of a difference in a recording, I don't know what will. To me, her voice sounded amazing on both of those mics. I was running both of them through the UA LA610 preamp, no EQ engaged, and about 3 dB of compression in the louder parts, but nothing crazy. There's a little reverb on her voice in the example, but that's it. No extra compression, no EQ, no anything else. The Shure had a little bit more top end, but the Akg to my ears had a little bit more full body. When she can sound that good with a $100 mic and you can't seem to get a good sound with a $3,000 mic, guess where the problem lies? Unless you're throwing a green bullet with a really disciplined singer, you can use just about anything and get a workable track. As always, if you've gotten anything from today's video, please hit that like and subscribe button. If you're interested in studio mics and other things audio related, hit that notify button so you'll be notified when we put up a new video. If you have any suggestions for a video or any questions regarding this one, again, please use that comment section or send us a message through our website. I'd love to hear from you. Well, that's it for this time. This is Pags, signing off.